get started, and we're going to do some little bit of housekeeping to get us started, and then dive really into the bulk of our time together. And so we're going to start with some introductions, but first we'll start with the kind of the core facilitators for the program and the Speak Truth to Power team. And then I will go briefly over the goals of this workshop, course, series, whatever we're calling it. And then a bit about our commitments and expectations. And then I will hand it over to our two primary facilitators for today. And we'll get going, okay? Does that sound good, everyone? So I will start off. My name is Karen Robinson. I'm the program director for Speak Truth to Power, and I could not be more excited to see all of you. This is brilliant, 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 brilliant. I'm gonna pass, let's go to the Speak Truth to Power team, and then let's hit up our core facilitators for this series. So Laura, Adnan, Jenny.
Hi, everybody. I'm Laura Osterndorf. I'm the training manager for Speak Truth to Power, and it's so exciting to see so many of you today. I actually got my start in community organizing as well when I was about 18, so it's just really exciting to be here with so many young people on this call, and thank you for the time.
Hi, everyone. My name is Adnan Karim. I am the managing director of human rights education here at RFK Human Rights. I actually got my start in the classroom, so I used to teach anywhere from elementary to middle, and I've also worked within high schools, and can't thank you all enough to spend one of your summer days here with us today. So thank you for being with us.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jenny Girardi. I'm the arts program coordinator or manager at Speak Truth to Power. And just to echo everyone else, it's so cool to see so many young people interested in community organizing and in making a difference in your communities. And so we're really, really excited to have you today.
Christine or Marissa, who wants to go?
Hey, my name is Christine Henderson. I am one of the instructors today, so I'm very thankful for having the opportunity to talk a little bit about my work with Equal Justice USA. I am a senior collective healing strategist. It's just a fun way of saying I work with the community around trauma and healing, working with survivors who have been victims of crime. We also work to support folks that have been sent to death. So really working on anti-death penalty cases, helping to lift up the voices of those who have been wrongly convicted of the crime, and helping to share their stories. I'm super excited. Thank you once again. Karen, Mona had sent me a message that she's been trying to get in, but it's not letting her in. I'm not sure if there's something you have to do.
Okay, I will work on that right now while Marissa introduces herself.
So hello, everyone. I think there's folks from around the world, which is amazing, and young people from everywhere. My name is Marissa. I'm right now based in Brooklyn, and I'm the executive director and founder of an organization called ARTE, so Art and Resistance Through Education. And we work with young people everywhere to focus on how to bring attention to human rights and human rights abuses in one's own community using the visual arts and using creativity and the imagination. So I'm super excited to be here. It's funny, actually, I think I started organizing when I was like in elementary school, and I was like trying to collect money for like endangered species or something like that. I'm not exactly sure what happened, or I didn't even know what I was doing. So I'm learning with you all here, and I'm bringing to the table creativity as you all do your organizing, learn how to organize. So we're all gonna do this together. So I'm super thrilled. And so I feel so inspired.
Excellent, thank you guys. So we have one of our other core facilitators will be joining soon. It was probably because I changed stuff off and she had the wrong thing. So let's dive into a little bit of the housekeeping, and then hopefully that worked for Mona and she can join us. Mona is a rock star organizer, brilliant. So hopefully that worked. And if it didn't, I'm gonna ask maybe one of my team just to maybe help me out. So the goals for this workshop, we have been at Speak to, hey, there's Mona. Mona, introduce yourself.
Hey, sorry, my computer was having a moment. My name is Mona. I work with Christine at Equal Justice USA. I do organizing and campaigns work, and I work with a really kick-ass team of organizers and strategists who are doing some great stuff around the country. Is that enough? Is that what I'm supposed to say?
Perfect. So I'm going to
Okay.
do a little bit of housekeeping, and then we're going to dive right into the session. But I just wanted to note, like, part of the beauty of this work, Mona and I worked at Amnesty International. Marissa and I connected through Human Rights Ed. Like, the beauty of this work is how we connect and how collectively we bring our interest, our power, our passion, our thinking, our out of the box. We're going to take this down, strategizing, to create real change. And that's what we want to do here. And at Speak to Power, I've been wanting to do this for a while, so we're totally stoked. So what we're hoping to do over the course of our time with you is to really build on, enhance your understanding of community organizing, really helping you dive a little deeper into kind of the idea of tactics and targets and goal setting and really the nuts and bolts of community organizing. And by the end, that last session, our goal is for you all to be sharing some of your plans, some of the work you've done with us over these next few sessions on how you want to create change in your community, how you define it on an issue that you care about. Over the course of our time together, we're going to use defunding police as kind of a model. So as we get into that template that I sent you, we'll use that when we talk about goal setting and to kind of model how you develop out your strategic plan. And so that's kind of what we hope to do. Today, we're going to really get into what is community organizing with some real world examples. The commitment. We know that for some people, they hate being on video. For some, they just can't. For whatever reason, that's totally cool. If you can be on video, that would be so amazing because we want to see you. We want to build a community here with all of you. But again, we totally understand if you don't want to have your video on, and that's fine, absolutely fine. I BCC'd you when I sent you some information. If you're fine with me just emailing and we start to build a collective body here, just let me know, no problem either way. We all come to this with our own experiences, our own passion, our own drive, our own desire to create long-term sustainable change on whatever that issue is we care about. We're going to celebrate that. We're going to tap into that. We're going to build on that as we spend time together. The chat, use the chat. We'll be monitoring that. So if we're talking about something, if something's going on and you're like, whoa, or yes, or whatever, put it in the chat and we'll be paying attention to that. The last couple things before we break into groups to introduce you all. I mentioned office hours. I will make myself available, and I know the other facilitators offered, but I'm not going to put them out yet. But I will be available 3 days a week for an hour time. If something comes up and you just want to call, just say, Karen, can I talk to you during one of those office hours? And that'll be totally cool. Of course, email is always available. And then finally, you know, we are really focused in the context of all of our work on anti-racism and anti-oppression. That's human rights work. That's what we're here to do. So that's one of the lenses that we engage in this work. And so again, build on our collective to really understand that from a variety of perspectives. All right, that was really quick because I want us to get to us. So what we're gonna do now is to break out into some breakouts. Break out into breakouts, everybody. And we're just gonna do a quick round of introductions. Who you are, where you're from. Maybe if you have an issue that you care about, you can throw it out there now. But not, we're gonna do like maybe 10 minutes on this so we can get into the heart of the session. Does that sound good, everybody? Bueno. Okay, here we go.
And as Karen's doing that, I put the questions in the chat box so people can reference that or copy it over if they want. But it should be informal and just a chance to get to know each other.
Hello, everybody. All right. I'm waiting to see if we have more people joining us. Okay, so me and Jenny, as you know from the introductions, are on the Speak Truth to Power team, so you know a little bit about us. Fantastic, more people are joining.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
All right, a group of women. Nice.
All right, looks like we have some more people coming in.
Hi, Anna.
All right. Jenny, do you want to kick us off or should I?
Sure. So, as Karen mentioned in this chat or in this breakout group, we're going to answer the questions that Marissa provided for us. So to start, my name is Jenny, and my preferred gender pronouns are she, her. I am in Washington, D.C. I am part of the team. Laura is also, we run Speak Truth to Power in Washington, D.C. Well, we were before quarantine, but I live in Reston, Virginia, so that's where I'm currently working from. And the human rights, social justice issues that are important to me, since having my son, children's rights have become super important to me. And as I run the arts programs, speaking truth through the arts has always been important to me. And I feel like for some people, I mean, we all speak truth in different ways. And I grew up as an artist. And so seeing powerful art, listening to songs about social justice have always been important to me. And that certain songs changed my life and really expanded my global perspective because I came to understand issues that were happening in the world I didn't know about through the arts. So those are the important issues to me. Laura?
Thanks, Jenny. So I'm Laura Osterndorf, as you already know and can see on Zoom. My gender pronouns are she, her. And I also wanted to say that if you ever want to provide your pronouns with your name, you can do that with the ... at the top of your square and rename there. I'm also in the Washington, D.C. office and have been in D.C. for about 5-ish years, on and off. And the human rights issues that I would say are most centric to my journey are around gender equality. You know, the classic phrase of women's rights are human rights, and I really believe in an intersectional feminist ideology. So that's really core to some of my human rights work for provision of quality education for women and girls. And then also an incorporation of comprehensive sexuality education that will kind of break down the binary system and ensure quality and accurate sexuality education is provided to all. So that's a little bit about the STTP team. But if anyone would like to start next, that would be great.
I'd love to. I'm Amber. My pronouns, I put them with my name. It's she, her. What is it? Where am I currently located? I'm in Manhattan right now, so that's where I live. I live on like Upper West, but I'm from Harlem, so. And I really relate to what you were saying beforehand, Laura. I really reside with like LGBTQ issues, you know, and I really want to fight for that. But there are a lot of like issues that I care deeply about, like whether it be like gender equality, like Black Lives Matter. You know, there are so many things that I want to be involved with. So I just, it feels weird like filing it down. So I'm just more like, I'm more for like the education of the rights of minorities, you know what I mean? Because there are a lot of struggles that minorities have to go through and a lot of people don't know about them. So that's what I'm all about.
Can you also tell us what grade you're in, or what school
yeah.
you're in, or how old you are?
So I'm 15.
Oh my gosh! That's awesome.
I'm a rising junior. Okay. And I go to the Academy for Software Engineering. Yeah.
Great.
That's amazing.
Can I start next?
Sure.
So my name is Isabella. I currently live in Queens, New York. And what am I? Oh yeah, my pronouns are she, hers, and hers. And I'm gonna be a senior in September, and I go to Frank Sinatra School of the Arts. And I'm just very passionate about human rights shouldn't be political. You're a human, you get rights. I don't know how it's so hard for people to process that. Like, how can they treat someone differently just because of their race, sexuality, gender identity, religion, ethnicity, whatever. It just mind boggles me, like, how people can do that. So I'm really passionate about educate your children, educate yourself, so that not so that it's like a fad on the Instagram, but so that you actually know how to interact with people in society and respect them. So I'm really passionate about that.
Thank you.
I could go next. Yaniris. I live in Washington Heights, Manhattan. My pronouns are she/her. The movements that I'm passionate about are gender equality, educational rights, just opportunities for minorities, since I am a minority and live in a neighborhood full of minorities. I'm really for feminism, because my school is mostly males, because we're technology, where I go to Academy for Software Engineering, like Amber. So there's mostly 5 girls in each class. So I'm really for women just being up there and just kind of just but we could do it too, not only men. Yeah. And I'm gonna be a rising senior in September.
That is awesome. And I'm so sorry, it looks like we're getting cut off in about 20 seconds. So hopefully we have another opportunity to break out later, and then we can hear from everyone else and get to know each other a little better.
I'm so impressed with you all.
I know.
The fact that you're so young and so informed and so passionate.
Everyone.
I'm seeing more faces. This is lovely.
Yeah, thank you all. I know it's not always what people want to do, but it really is nice to see everyone. Nice to see you, Jose. Jose's been in touch with me. Right, I think we're back. I think we're
Okay, are we ready?
Right. Take it away, Mona and Christine.
Okay, so I'm gonna give us a little roadmap, and then we're just gonna jump right in. We are gonna do 3 basic things in the next 40-ish minutes. We're gonna essentially use the death penalty to give a case study around organizing. We're gonna try to make connections to goal setting and strategy and tactics as we tell you the story of the death penalty movement over the last 20-ish years. Christine is gonna, as part of that, Christine is gonna tell us a story about some very specific work in Florida that's part of that bigger work. And then we're gonna send you out with a few questions and some homework for the next session. Does that work for y'all? Christine, did I get it all in there? All right. So before we start, I actually want to acknowledge that this morning, the US government executed somebody for the first time in 17 years. That actually happened under the cover of darkness with a death warrant that has been expired. That death warrant expired at midnight, and the US government worked tirelessly through the night to execute someone at 8 a.m. this morning, East Coast time. I think even just hearing what went down, witnesses rousted in the middle of the night at 2 a.m., the man who was executed was strapped onto the gurney for 8 hours waiting to be executed. And the way in which this went down is I think very emblematic of what we see in the death penalty across the board, and that there are constantly missteps, and that the government works very hard to do whatever they can to execute folks, even if it is shady. That's my personal opinion, but shady. So with that beginning, I'm going to try to set the stage for the death penalty work that's been happening. And first, I think what I think of as the capital A abolition movement in the United States has actually been going on for over 400 years. You know, that work begins with the work to end slavery in the US. You know, that work moves through Jim Crow, it moves through lynching, it moves through mass incarceration, it moves through these extrajudicial police killings that we see today, through the criminal legal system that we know, and as we see it incarcerating folks and executing people. So this is it's a very long movement, and we stand on the shoulders of many great abolitionists. And so I think I find it's been a great privilege to work in this movement and to be able to have an opportunity to get to know the folks we get to know. But today, I'm not going to tell you 400 years of history, because that is probably not interesting to anybody. So we're going to start 20 years ago. And just to think 20 years ago, we're talking about the year 2000. In the 90s, the United States really went through a place of identifying justice as punishment. And so very much of the legislation around criminal justice and around reform is about a carceral system that punishes folks, putting people in jail, executing folks. And so during that time, states were very emboldened. And so we were seeing executions, you know, in some cases there were like, you know, over 100 people executed each year, hundreds of people being sent to death across the country. States were executing, and there was opposition, but it was in very small pockets, and it was very much focused on like end stage, right? What we saw work around the death penalty was a little bit of individual casework that really culminated in a lot of like organizing that happened at prisons when executions would happen. And so 20 years ago, there were a lot of folks in the movement decided, you know, it's really time for us to have a more coordinated approach if we want to end the death penalty. And so this group of folks came together from across sectors and really came up with the big goal for the death penalty movement, which was to end the death penalty in the United States by 2025. And that's the goal that many organizations and individuals who have worked inside the death penalty movement decided to agree on together. You can imagine how long it takes to coordinate this kind of series of conversations that happened over, gosh, I think 2 to 4 years. These conversations happened in various sectors. And so out of that agreement, in that 2025 goal, that's when we really started, I think, what I really think of as the modern era of organizing and movement against the death penalty. But a goal is just a goal, right? It needs a scaffolding, it needs strategies, it needs objectives, it needs tactics. And so that's what we've seen over the last 20 years, I think, in this work. And so the way that the movement started to organize itself was it started to look at what are the different areas in which we can have impact. So we started to see different strategic tracks come out. Communications track, and communications track is focused on what we like to think of as narrative shift, which basically means if you look at articles from the late 90s, even the mid 2000s about the death penalty, whether it's about individual cases or about the death penalty, those articles start from the assumption that the death penalty is just a given. We're going to execute people. There's nothing wrong with it. This is how we hold people accountable, and the death penalty is justice. And so from our perspective on the communication side, we wanted to shift that narrative away from the idea that the death penalty is justice. And so this communications track really worked and continues to work very strategically about what do we need, who needs to talk about the death penalty in order to start shifting that message. and what is it that we want to say about the death penalty. And so that communications track, you know, if you start looking at death penalty media from the 2000s up for the last 20 years, you'll start to see a significant shift in the way the media has talked about the death penalty. Now you see more words like broken and unfair and innocent people being executed, many, many more questions. You know, the way in which we see stories happen are more about questioning the death penalty and less about the assumption that it should be there. That is 20 years of communications work to try and shift that narrative, and getting voices like family members of murder victims in the media, family members of folks whose loved ones have been executed, you know, folks like corrections officers who have participated in executions and understand how that continues to traumatize folks, etc. So there's a communications track. There's a legal track in that, which is capital litigation attorneys all over the country working to save the lives of their individual clients, but also doing work to effectively educate courts. One good example is Washington State attorneys, not just death penalty attorneys, but criminal legal defense attorneys worked to educate Washington State Supreme Court about systemic racism in the court systems. And they've brought very specific cases to the court with an idea to be able to bring to bear research and information to the court to understand the impact of systemic racism. The fruit of that labor was born last year. We're talking about 20 years, maybe more, of legal challenges when the Washington Supreme Court considered Washington's death penalty unconstitutional because because of systemic racism. You know, that happened because of the strategic work that the legal teams and litigation teams have been doing. Another strategic track that came out of this is research. And this impacts a lot of different things. It impacts, you know, who we might target, how we might target. It gives us critical information for our communication so we can start talking about the way in which the death penalty is meted out with evidence. You probably know that evidence is often important. It's important for us to be able to point to scholarly information. It's important for us to be able to point to statistics so that we can make the points that we're trying to say a reality. Another track is state legislation and also a policy track. Early in the 2000s, there were very few states that were even willing to consider legislation to end the death penalty. In fact, in those early days, the only thing that got us in the door was talking about moratoriums on the death penalty, just a pause. We're just asking to just stop for a minute and let's think a little bit about what the impact of the death penalty. But that was a very strategic choice because we knew, one, we could get into the room, and two, we knew that we could often give a reason for the pause, which was to learn more about the death penalty, which would give us information, right? Cost studies about race. And so in those early 2000s, there was a big movement of states. There were several studies about race in the death penalty, several studies about cost. So we were able to use the legislative organizing to get us information that we often needed from the state. It also allowed us to start talking about the death penalty to legislators in a way that we hadn't, and to bring in all the various folks who we have been bringing in who are impacted by the death penalty. You know, in that time and since then, 10 states have repealed the death penalty legislatively. And that has been the work of not just EJUSA, but many, many organizations and folks on the ground who have done the work to coordinate and create individual state campaigns. You know, it takes on average, it's like 3 to 10 years to pass a piece of legislation. So I think it's important to note that within this big goal of we're going to end the death penalty by 2025, which was a 25-year goal at the time, you know, even individual pieces of that strategy take 5 to 10 years. And that it's so important to remember that the organizing work that we do now, we might not see those fruits from for 10, 15, 25 years, but everything that you do now, like, feeds into the well of organizing in the future. And that is how we've been able to make such big gains because of also the organizing work that came before us. speaking of organizing, the last piece of that strategic track is the organizing work. And that is work in individual communities, looking at individual policies and trying to find different ways to basically like move the issue forward, you know, every step closer to ending the death penalty. So that I think is like the setup of, you know, the condition, the strategy that the goals that we're working in, which is to end the death penalty by 2025, which is we're still within, you know, 5 years of that goal. This, I think before I turn it over to Christine, the one thing I want to note about this is that when this goal first happened, the assumption was that the death penalty would probably not end in the US until the Supreme Court actually ended that, because there are probably some states that aren't going to do it legislatively. Those are my sirens, I apologize. And so part of the legislative track was also to get the big question to the US Supreme Court, and that question is the death penalty cruel and unusual? And so part of the litigation track is, it's two-tracked, right? It's a state track, and it's also a federal track. You know, in the last 4 years, the court has changed quite a bit. And so I think there is a recognition in the death penalty movement that having a Supreme Court that would repeal the death penalty in the next 5 years is much smaller than it was before the court changes. But it doesn't stop the move towards ending the death penalty. Because as we've all seen in court decisions over the last week or so, you never know what the Supreme Court is going to do. So that's, I think, the big frame of the work that we're working in. And I think Christine is going to talk to us about some very specific work that brings together some of these strategic tracks, right? So one of the things that happened with research is to just ask questions about who's executing, where executing. And one of the things that we found out is that in the US, some high 90% of death sentences come from only 3% of counties in the United States. And that is a very teeny tiny number. It ends up being like some counties in Florida, Harris County, and then like a couple Southern Cal counties. So we learned this from the research that happened. And so to bring this research track together under the broader goal, we worked with communications. So actually a series of reports were written. And then then we worked to bring organizing together, because within this, we're talking about very local organizing, because who is it that impacts who gets the death sentence? Who gets the death sentence? The prosecutor. And prosecutors are locally elected. And prosecutors have a lot of power. And so it was a very clear understanding that if one of the ways in which we could drive down death sentences was getting prosecutors to seek death less. And so that's all these three, and also I think legal folks come together under this as well. So these tracks really came together, really focused on Florida, and we hired Christine to start doing some of this organizing work in Florida. So she's going to talk about her work in Florida. So remember how this telescopes out from, 2025 in the US all the way down to 3 counties in Florida with the goal of reducing death sentences. So Christine, did I give you a good floor?
You gave me a good transition.
Okay, good.
I'm going to end up sharing my screen, but thank you, Mona. One thing that I just wanted to give you guys, I'm going to actually give you more of a visual walking you through what some of our organizing looked like. By the time I was brought on, the concern that was being pushed was, of those 3% that Mona shared of counties that have been excessively using the death penalty, 4 of those counties came from my state of Florida. And when we realized that one state carried 4 counties when there's 16 nationally that uses the death penalty, it was a concern. And so one of the things that Mona talked about was about strategy, right? Kind of knowing what we're going to do, what we need to do. But when we looked at the state and we looked at the counties, we also knew with the research that had been done prior to, because of the data that was collected throughout this county from the initial research, that there was going to be a report that was going to be coming out. that was going to highlight all of the counties that were kind of the bad of the bad, right? That we're going to show what's going on with these 16 counties, that they all have the same type of issues. All of them had overzealous prosecutors. All of them were direct filing youth, charging them as adults in high numbers. All of them had a lot of complaints around the treatment with the community and police. So we started to see a systemic we started to see a pattern. So now I'm going to share my screen real quick and just kind of walk you through some of the things that we were able to do within these counties. Because what we did was we helped to bring awareness, but at that same time, some of the stuff that Mona was talking to you about, narrative shifting, right? Using communications, using the media, we put all of this kind of in a crystal ball, shook it up, and we worked our behinds off to kind of create what we're able to create. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Let's see here. You guys see my screen now? Awesome. Okay. So what we kind of have here is the county strategy implemented, right? The actual report was written and it published and was ready to go out. We were aware that this was going to come out. And because we were aware of it, we were able to kind of organize and mobilize ahead of the report, start to go on the ground in some of these counties and start to build some relationships in order to start to have more of a dialogue and start to educate around this issue. Jacksonville, Florida is the initial county that we really started digging our heels in. One, I was a local organizer in Jacksonville. And there was already an amazing group of social justice leaders, faith leaders that are doing their thing in Jacksonville. Luckily, I had a background in which I have worked with some of them in the past. And so I knew that we needed to have conversations. What we wanted to do was, there was no need to interrupt the movement that was already going on the ground in Jacksonville. They were literally moving towards criminal justice reform. They were talking about bail reform. They were talking about children being direct filed and charged as adults, right? At that time, there was a mother, Darlene Farah, who you see the flyer here, whose daughter was killed by a young man that the prosecutor was seeking the death penalty. The mother herself didn't want the death penalty. Yeah, didn't want the death penalty for the man that took her daughter's life. When I first met Darlene, I was floored at just the humanity. And she said, the state failed this young man. What gives me the right to take his life? I was, and she had said, help me to raise my voice, help me to put my story out there, because the prosecution wants to seek the death penalty. We're against it as a family. I'm against it personally. And with that, we were able to help her to have an event, Not in My Name, where she actually wanted to share the story about why this was important to her not to take the life of the young man, for her to have for closure and for healing. We worked with faith leaders within the community who were already in their movement on criminal justice reform. The conversation was not forget your issue. Let me show you why your issue and death penalty, these issues overlap. Let me explain to you how the death penalty is the linchpin to all of these other issues, right? And because of that, we were able to have doors open for us. We were able to talk to faith leaders, community leaders, survivors who had stories like Darlene, and get in the door around the issues of death penalty. And the movement actually was like, this is right. Like, we should be addressing the issue with the death penalty. Here you see a couple of pictures of some of the faith leaders who actually got together, had a huge press conference taking on the prosecutor. What I will say about this prosecutor, she's well known and was nationally known for being one of the worst prosecutors in the history of mankind. And that was her reputation. This was also something that folks in the community did not appreciate. And so it was really a face-on. The prosecutor had publicly said that the mother didn't care about her daughter, because she was standing on the side of the young man, the life that she was trying to save. So there actually caused a division within the community, and folks from the community, no matter how they felt, because there are some folks that support the death penalty, and no one walks the same line. But I think for the community to watch through the media how the prosecutors were attacking the so-called victim, right? The survivor, the mother who has lost her child, was being dragged through the mud. The community stood with her. The faith leaders, everyone, the leadership within the community stood up and was like, wait, this is a problem. This is an issue. And there was a lot more dialogue. I will say that at the end of this prosecutor had years of what the community would say tormenting the community and their children. At the end of the day, when it was time for the election time came around, a lot of Democrats switched over to Republican and voted her out because they were tired of it. But this kind of just shows you some of the things that we were able to do. Faith leaders got together and filled out a sign-on letter, sent the letter to the prosecutor. It had about over 50 signatures. I think we were at 53 signatures at the time we delivered. And it was a shock. The media covered it, press events, and Darlene herself was able to go around and share her story. Eventually, the new prosecutor that came in did give Darlene what she wanted. The young man received a life sentence. He did not get death. And she was actually able to go and meet and sit and talk with him and got to learn his story and realize that he had a really hard story of his life, and really a young man who the system did fail him. And her quest to not ruin someone else's life kind of caused that movement in Jacksonville. When all of this was happening in Jacksonville, I'm sorry, I talked about the 4 counties, but I didn't list the counties. So Jacksonville was the first one we talked about. Tampa, St. Petersburg, Florida, and Miami-Dade County, where I'm from. So now, while we're doing all this organizing in Jacksonville, the Washington Post is covering some of this stuff, we get a phone call from Tampa. We knew that we had to hit up Tampa and start organizing. I was just one organizer trying to organize in the whole state. I had relationships in some of these counties because I did a lot of criminal justice reform work, also juvenile justice reform work prior to. So my initial thing was like, what do you do best as an organizer? You start to do your research, you start calling some of your friends from different organizations and getting some help, some guidance. Who do you reach out to? But Tampa called us and they said, hey, we saw what you did in Jacksonville. We're not happy with the death penalty and we actually want to talk about it. And so we were looking at Hillsborough County, which is Tampa, Pinellas County, which is St. Pete. The only thing that separates them is a bridge. So we were, well, what can we do? How can we touch 2 counties at one time, try to lift their voices and keep the movement going? We knew that this report was coming out. And at the time we were preparing, we were able to start to get some signatures once again. We had over 75 faith leaders cross the nominations in under 2 weeks that we were able to get letters and petition signs, op-eds placed in the paper. But once the actual report came out, of course, the prosecutors had to go on the fence. This is not us, this is not true, don't believe the report. And right in the smack dab when they're trying to explain all of this, the Florida Supreme Court slaps them with the jury that says that the way that Florida has been practicing the death penalty was unconstitutional. So we had all of these men, about 300 some odd folks on death row in the state of Florida. Now about half of them who received death when it was not a unanimous jury, which means in Florida, there was a special thing. It was allowed, even though it's kind of known that you probably couldn't do it. They just did it because no one ever called on it. For years since the death penalty was re-implemented back in Florida in the 70s, if someone was not found guilty unanimously, like all 12 jurors said they're guilty, you sentence them to death, a judge could not sentence you to death. But judges were consistently sentencing folks to death without unanimous jury. This was one of the pieces that we were well aware of in the research phase, right? Knowing that things were going to the courts, knowing that something was going to come back. And right in the smack dab of our organizing, we got such great media to cover that. Well, after that happened, we were able to have 2 press conferences in Tampa as well as St. Petersburg. Here you see some pictures of faith leaders across the between St. Petersburg and Tampa coming together. They delivered their signed letters from their county directly to the state attorney's office after the press conferences to let them know that they don't support the death penalty. They want to know where their prosecutors stand and they want to address some of these issues. A lot of this pressure that you see here actually did the same thing, similarity that happened in Jacksonville. They ousted the old prosecutor in Tampa, and they got a whole different prosecutor who's actually more on the reform side, who would listen to folks, that sat down and met with faith leaders. More op-eds were signed, letters were delivered. We also had panels where we were able to bring members of like Witness to Innocence, exonerees from Florida death row, tell their stories about how the state almost took their lives for a crime they never committed. And then we had to organize down in my hometown, Miami, Florida. Now, Miami was different a little because we weren't necessarily heavy on the ground because of our locale, but what we were able to do was call up our friends, right? Organizing with groups like the NAACP. We partnered up with HBCU, Florida Memorial College down in Miami, in which we had young youth that organized on campus, partnered up with the NAACP, partnered up with ourselves, and we made sure that we had opportunities where we can help share and educate what was actually going on in Miami-Dade County. Here is some of the folks. We had a press conference event with NAACP, and young students participated. It was supposed to be a blown out press event, but as organizers will learn when you do this work, sometimes you got to ride by the fly, and at the last minute, some folks in the legal realm of the NAACP got a little nervous on calling out their prosecutor, because they felt that that the defense, they had a pretty good defense team. They had a really good, and they didn't really want to mess up that relationship. So literally a day before the press conference, speakers organized, the students were ready to go. We had to revamp and change the vibe. So we said, all right, nobody wants to do a press conference because they're nervous. Let's change this into a dialogue, a conversation. And as you can see in the picture, we were actually able to bring a survivor who's sitting across from me. This is where my dreads were a lot shorter, sitting directly across from me. We actually were able to hear her story, and she had an amazing story to tell. A survivor who watched her dad take his last breath as the attacker attacked her and her father. Her father was a pastor for years. She shared her story that Suzanne Bosner, she shared her story that her dad was against the death penalty, but because she was mad, she was hurt, she was in pain for everything that, going through with the system, she supported it initially. But as she was healing and as she was going through the process, because what people fail to understand is when someone is sentenced to death, this isn't oh, you're sentenced to death and tomorrow things are good to go. No, by law, there's a process. That person has a right to appeal, right? So for years, folks who have sought the death penalty, families who go after the death penalty sometimes tell you, I wish I knew now. I wish I knew then what I know now. Years and years, 20, 30 years, still no death sentence because the law gives the power of going back and forth. And so it doesn't help families with healing. And she shared her story and actually shared how when she decided that she wanted to support, she did not want the young man who killed her father and almost took her life to die, the prosecutors turned on her. And they say kind of the same thing I shared with you about what you saw in Jacksonville. They wanted to shut her up. She was threatened to be thrown in jail for sharing her thoughts that she didn't support the death penalty, and she was the survivor. Same battle, different county. Suzanne won that battle, paid her own money, hired her own attorney to fight for the life of the man who almost took her life, and sharing her story about what it was doing to her and how she, as a survivor, was having this experience. This goes a little bit to what Mona was talking to you guys about, right? It's about narrative shifting, right? So many times when we're talking about the death penalty or you hear the death penalty, you hear about this horrific crime, you hear about this person who probably had the worst life in history and had all these issues and drama, and these are the people that need to get thrown away. But rarely do you hear the story from the side of those that are victimized that actually say, I don't support this. This isn't gonna help me heal. This isn't going to help me. This process hurts. This isn't fair. I don't believe in it. My faith says no. I just morally don't support it. These voices sometimes tend to get watered down because when, crimes like this happen, which obviously are horrific crimes, right? How do you sit there and judge which one's the worst of the worst? When you put it and you say, hey, this crime is worse than this, so this one deserves death and this one doesn't. How does that provide healing for a family? And so we were able to find opportunities to, one, put our information out in the media, kind of debunk some of these these myths that are said, but also lift the voices of those that are actually affected by them, that can say, hey, no, yes, I lost someone took my child's life, someone took my loved one's life, but I don't support the death penalty, and this is why. And because this was coming from the voices of who people felt like, wow, that's the person who was harmed, started to listen. Legislators started to listen. Community folks started to listen. Organizations that were nervous, right? Because a lot of us know when we're organizing, a lot of it is collaborating, partnering up, calling our buddies at ACLU, NAACP, our local faith leaders, right? Our AME churches, our Catholic mobilizers. We're stretched everywhere. We're trying to call everyone. But sometimes folks are like, hey, we got you, but we got you behind the scenes. Death penalty is a little touchy. So even in this work, we have to find ways to make our allies comfortable, because some of the topics can be a little bit uncomfortable. And I'm trying to watch time because I'm a blabber, y'all. And let me make sure I'm doing, okay. I'm gonna wrap this up. So we continued on after kind of working within our counties. We had events statewide. Cities for Life was one of the events that we do within the state. Within this, we go and we share, we talk about the death penalty, we address the issues with the death penalty, we move to end the death penalty. While this was happening, while we were organizing and mobilizing, another situation happened. Father Rene, that you see here, was murdered by someone that he was actually helping in the church. Father Rene was very public about not supporting the death penalty. Matter of fact, he had signed a decree within the church saying that if anything ever happened to him, he does not support the death penalty against anyone that might commit a crime against him. And unfortunately, this happened. He was killed in Florida and driven to the state of Georgia. And there was a whole controversy going around this time. Here we're fighting the unanimous jury. Everyone's kind of going crazy because now all these guys that were sentenced to jail, sentenced to death that wasn't allowed, we're now looking at them getting resentenced. We're organizing in all these counties. The media is going crazy covering the survivors who are now, their voices are being lifted, and people are questioning, well, were we right on the death penalty? Should we be looking at things? And all of a sudden, Father Rene passes away, and now a whole different state. Because his body was found in Georgia, they reached out to us and saying, hey, we want to support Father Rene's movement within the Catholic movement and support not seeking the death penalty for this young man in Georgia. We helped them draft their op-ed and their sign-on letter, in which they had over 7,000 signatures from folks in Florida, where they took this letter to Georgia to fight that prosecutor in another state, mimicking our tactics that we used here in the state of Florida. And I'm gonna go move quickly. Orlando was not one of our outlier states. It wasn't one of our 4, but it became a big ticket county because it was one of our partnering states where Aramis Ayala was the first African-American state attorney in the state of Florida. So that was already getting reviews. She ran on reform. She ran on change, criminal justice reform, which was a little different in our state. And so for being a person of color who's on what people usually see as the wrong side of the law, but saying, I want to address and do things different, it got a lot of attention. And she did not support the death penalty. Senator Bracey was the first senator who sat on a criminal justice chair in the state of Florida. It was the first African-American at that time as well. And it was like, wow, so we have allies at the leadership table that can understand the concerns of the community. And we started to make sure that we built those relationships. Latino Justice at that same time nationally came out and said that they were against the death penalty and took their stance. They were based in Orlando. And so Orlando became our sister organizing because Aramis Ayala publicly came out against the death penalty. We took advantage of the opportunity and the lay of the land. We brought Darlene to share her story, have a discussion with the evangelical community, which sometimes we bump heads with when it comes to the death penalty in conversations, but they were willing to open up their doors and open up their hearts. And we had over 2,000 folks on Facebook Live having a great conversation around here. Herman Lindsay, that you see up here, is Florida's 23rd exoneree. They almost took his life, but he survived. He was also willing to share his story. And I can't see Shane, but I believe you guys can see him. He is an advocate against the death penalty, an evangelical reformist, I guess you could call, who was raised differently and is now kind of changing the narrative with the evangelical community on why the death penalty is wrong and why we should be looking at social justice issues within the evangelical community. So we brought our partners together to make sure that we're bringing awareness. We were able to go to Orlando and support Aramis Ayala, the prosecutor, when she came out publicly and said, "I will not seek death for anyone who in her county." The governor stepped in. It became kind of ugly. He started taking cases from her, saying that you don't have a right to do this. We were able to help organize and support the community, because at this point the community said, actually, we voted her in because of this reason. So the governor stepping in and pulling his, popping his collar to show his power really upset the community. And with that, we were able to go and have forums and have dialogues and trainings with the community. ACLU, the Black Lawyers Association came out. And all of these things that are happening, these are now allies. These are now relationships that we've built. These are awareness opportunities. All of this stuff was covered in the media. We were creating the platforms for the narrative. The NAACP comes out and they take a stand. There's a rally that we organized, over 500 people. We bussed them from all over the state up to the state capitol to support Aramis Ayala with her stance against the death penalty. That same day, Color of Change was delivering, I think, 50-something thousand signatures to the governor. It didn't get any play because they were outside where this organizing was happening. We took over the Capitol. There was a chants coming from everywhere, and everyone coming and saying, we support Aramis Ayala for her decision. And that pressure was right outside of the governor's office, as you can see the pictures there. And yes. And once you see the buildup of pressure, then all of a sudden the Black Caucus that was kind of quiet before, now they were kind of, wait a minute, I'm seeing the media. Oh, wait a minute, they went to Tallahassee. Oh, wait a minute, they stood outside the governor's office. Oh, wait a minute, and now they start to feel the pressure. Well, now they've made me feel safe to come out and say, we support Aramis Ayala. We're against the death penalty and the way it's being implemented, because the people gave them the power to not be afraid to use their voice. And I think, what is it that really helped us within our work? It was really kind of setting the stage of working together, reaching out and organize. Here are some pictures of a community group that we work with within our trauma network, building those relationships, going out and hearing everyone's story, and making sure that there's an understanding of what the narrative shifting is, right? Making sure that when we go out publicly and we're talking about it, we're not using some of the old lingo. It was our journey, it was our strategy. With all of this that I've shared within our small time period, these last pictures here, we took all of our leaders from our 4 counties, or actually 5 counties, our adopted Orlando, to then, after having so much movement, after having so much progress, we went together to Montgomery at the Legacy Museum to really connect the history of slavery and lynching and the death penalty. And we all came together and actually did some planning and strategizing for ongoing organizing within the state of Florida. So I'm gonna pull back now. I feel like I've said a lot, but I really just wanted to make sure we walked you through some of the things that Mona talked about, the tactics, the narrative shifting, the research, the relationship building. These were all important in order to kind of do the progress, the small victories that we were able to have in the state of Florida.
Thanks, Christine. So Karen, I think we are planning to do this outro as we roll out. Is that cool? Or do you want to say something before I do that? Or do you want to be the last? Tell me what you want.
I should probably unmute. Marissa has a couple comments, but why don't you all wrap up kind of your piece, and then Marissa can close us out.
Okay, great. So as Karen mentioned, we wanted to talk about the death penalty today as a case study, just to give you a sense of, what, one movement has done in some small ways to try and work towards ending the death penalty. So you can kind of see how some of those, the scaffolding of the bigger campaign, and that really what you saw and is that there are several like campaigns inside campaigns inside campaigns. Like there's so many ways to take it. But for the balance of this, one of the big goal that we're going to talk about for the purpose of this is this defund the police that is out there. And I think this is going to be the topic that we're going to use to hook on how do we think about building a campaign? How do we think about building strategy? And so Chris and I came up with 3 questions, and I think Karen and Marissa, I'll probably email them to you as soon as we get done. Because what we wanted you all to think about is what is up in your community around this effort around defunding the police. I will give you the question. I'll just say the questions, but then I'll email them to Karen so you can email them out to you. So we want you to find out, is there any effort in your city or town to defund or redirect any part of the police budget? And if so, who's involved? And more specifically, who is missing from being at the table? The second question is, what is the campaign or campaigns trying to accomplish those goals? And do you think that their goal would meet the needs of your community? You know, you don't have to answer the question based on anybody else, but do you think that will meet the needs of your community from where you sit? And the third question is, what do you notice about what the campaign is doing? Thinking about tactics and strategies. Are they doing events, protests, civil disobedience? Are they doing, city council resolutions? What do you see happening inside the campaign? So those are the 3 sort of buckets of things that we wanted you to explore in your own communities as we start having this broader conversation.
Marissa, do you want to jump in?
Sure, and I just want to give a round of applause to y'all because I love that you also, there's so much, it was so rich, so much to share, and like you went through it all, so thank you for that. That was amazing. And for the folks, I had the privilege of hearing folks at the very beginning and hearing introductions, and I totally also understand that some folks are new to this, and that, like I said, the fact that you're even on this call and a part of it, that is one step into this longer term commitment to organizing and social justice. So I want to applaud you all for that. There's so many other things to say, but I'll just be really short. I love that also the example that you all shared was you had a very clear idea of what you want to change. And I think that as we move throughout this series, thinking about like really making very concise and crystallizing what is the thing that you all want to change exactly. And I heard a lot of folks talk about homelessness. I heard a lot of folks talk about mental health. All those things like are all important, and thinking about what is the thing that you want to organize to change. I also love that you talked a lot about shifting the idea of a narrative. And a lot of the work that I do with art, the idea that things don't have to be the way that they are. And we lived before police, and we're going to live without police. And just thinking about how we shift the narrative is how we talk about things, right? And then and a lot of, you already talked about Mona, which I'm grateful for, but also like again, like what seems like a very large campaign is also made into smaller, bite-sized kind of smaller campaigns, and celebrating the smaller victories and the smaller kind of things that come up. Talk about like collaboration, partners. So as you think, like you mentioned, Mona, like as you think about who's in your community on the ground and those questions, thinking about who are the people you're going to partner up. And I think also someone brought up too, thinking about power across all of these things. So the idea that we lifting the voices of those who are actually effective and bringing them on board and building genuine relationships and not tokenizing people. There's definitely ways to do that. And we're also working to disrupt these traditional power systems, right? That like that we are using people, or that we like, I'll give you this if you give me that. It doesn't have to be that way either. That together we're working to change something because it directly impacts the people that we love and care about. I think that's good. We're gonna go more into it, and I hope there's other key takeaways that you'll take. One last thing I want to just throw in there, and I don't expect for people to answer right now because I want to respect time. But also, I do think it is important to think about reflection. Why do we do the work that we do? Why is it important? And thinking about one way that oftentimes organizations or workshops do is a thorn in a rose. So you can write in the chat if you can stay a few extra minutes, or you can just think about it as you're taking notes on your own paper or computer. Like, what is something that you liked about today and you learned? So the rose, if you will, and what is something you found challenging, something you'd like to see more of next time as a thorn? And we offer it as a way to close this group, but also as a way as you start to organize and build with other people, what are some ways that you can reflect together? Because again, as you saw from the campaign example, you might have done something, but then something came up. So then how do you build on it, reflect, change, and then organize again and organize again? So thank you. It was such an honor to be with you all. Thank you.
So as we close out, I would ask first, thank you, Mona and Christine. They won't be with us next session, but then you'll be back to us. And we're going to really dive more into the idea of setting those goals. What are those small steps to accomplish those bigger goals? And we know that you're looking at a range of issues. So just because we're asking you to focus on, to think about this through the lens of defunding the police, as you're doing that, apply that to what your issue is. I know Jack is interested in representation in his class, and Jose is interested in mental health. So I know that you have other issues, so just continue to thread this all together. And my one big takeaway is, like, this is work. You know, this is really work if we really want to create systemic change. And for those issues that you care about, recognize, as Mona said, your piece may be here, but always be thoughtful and understanding of that longer term, and embrace that. Embrace what it will take. And to echo Marissa, the fact that you're on this call and you've hung with us for over an hour on an issue that's really, really hard is brilliant. You are brilliant. And I can't wait to see where we are in 5 weeks when you're presenting your plans and where you've taken them, and where you hope to take them after our time together. So again, please feel free to email me anytime. You all have my email address. If you have other questions, we'll manage. I don't want to bombard. This is my job. Christine, Mona, and Marissa have other jobs. They're helping us out, so I don't want to like dump on them. But feel free to email me. I try to get back to people really quickly. I will send you my office hours where I will be on my phone ready to talk to you. We're here to support. We're here to be with you through this, because every step is a learning experience, and collectively we have more power than those that are trying to deny basic fundamental human rights and social justice. So let's own it. Let's build on it. And thank you, everyone. Thank you, particularly Christina and Mona and Marissa for helping out today. And we'll see you next week. Yeah?
Thanks, y'all.
Be good. Be good, everybody. Be safe.
Everybody.
Lots of love. Thanks, Marissa.
Ask you one thing.
Sure, sure.
Or should I wait, or can I just text you, or?
What you can do that. Go ahead. Yeah.